much. It's a real pleasure to be here. And it's so exciting to talk to an audience which I think intuitively gets this thing, that innovation is an extremely important, extremely critical function in our economies of today. But I wanted to start by telling you about a question which perplexed me right through my career, from my very first days at school right through to now, and it's this one. Is it actually possible to predict innovation? Is it possible to predict what new things are going to come? Is it possible to make innovation a predictable and repeatable process in organisations? And I was informed in this question in my early childhood by this series of books. This is the Foundation series by Asimov. And in this is this most amazing science. He calls it psychohistory. And psychohistory, this mythical science, is the ability through mathematics and statistics to predict the way humans will behave, human populations will behave in their governments, in their technology, in their societies. Now, it's a mythical science. But actually, it was inspiring because in this book it talks about these rivers of equations walking past that predict the way things are going to happen in the future. And I was so taken with this that when I finally got to university and I was searching around for a thing to do in doctoral research on, this came to my mind and I decided, well, I'm going to create that river of equations. And here they are. These were my river of equations. These are the actual equations from my doctorate, and I took these equations and I computer simulated them, and basically the idea is I wanted to be able to predict how new ideas would spread in populations before you put the idea out there. Now, in computer simulation, this works excellently. Regrettably, however, the simulation also requires 12 parameters, at least 6 of which are not measurable in any way in any real population. And so, actually, at the end of this work, I come to the conclusion that, you know what, innovation, it really just isn't that predictable. And I'm like pretty devastated at this point because I'm going, well, you know what, I've got a doctorate in something that's useless, and now I have to find a job. So anyway, what I do then is I do the usual things that people who say they're having innovation careers do. By the way, at this time in my life, innovation was probably an academic discipline with about the same rigour as basket weaving. So I was thinking, well, I'm going to have to go and be a technology scout, or maybe I'm going to go and have to be one of those people who try and forecast the future, and perhaps I'm going to have a lab with beanbags and post-it notes, and this is what I thought I was going to do. But after a few decades of those kinds of things, I wound up here at Lloyds Banking Group. Lloyds Bank is the largest bank in England, certainly one of the largest in Europe, and they made me the Chief Innovation Officer, which was a very fancy title for something that was probably oxymoronic in banking. Anyway, they said, your job, James, is to change the future of banking. We are sick of always competing on brand. We are sick of always having to change our terms and conditions and play with interest rates. Your job is to change the future. And they go, what you need to do is create these new things. Your job, James, is to create these new things. And so, with lots of money behind me, we duly go and create new things. One of our successful products was this. This major innovation is a credit card account with 2 cards. And you know, I'm so proud of myself because we're the first person to have a bank account with 2 cards attached to it. And actually, this was quite a hit product, but you could by no means call it an innovation. But we were emboldened by our success, and so we did this thing. This is called Save the Change. And Save the Change is an excellent product. What you do is every time you use a credit or debit card in a machine, it rounds up the number to the largest whole number that's close and deposits the difference in a savings account. This was also a hit product in the UK. However, it was actually first a hit product at Bank of America, and all we did was rip it off. So you can see, actually, we were really a little bit even more cheeky than that, because not only did we rip off the product, we ripped off their press release and put our name in it and put that out. Anyway, the net of all of this is, this was quite an innovative product. It was a bit of a hit, but actually you couldn't really say we were really changing the future of banking. And eventually, my boss comes along and she goes, actually, where actually is my breakthrough? And are you ever going to deliver that soon? And so my team and I put our heads together because we were facing a new problem. And the new problem was that in banking, all these phone companies were starting to put payments chips in their phones. And if they did that, we were likely to lose the entire credit card business. And my brilliant team and I thought, well, if phone companies are going to put payments chips in their phones, then we are going to put phones in our credit cards. And here it is. Do you know, as bankers, it's amazing what you can achieve. And one thing which is amazing to us is that when you ring up a fab company, they will actually create anything you ask for, no matter how stupid it is. And so we get this fab company, and they actually make us a digital credit card. These are actual images of it. It's a screen on the front. It has a thumbprint reader down the side, and the clicky button lets you scroll through all the credit products you're going to have. And of course, it also has a phone stack in it and all the other stuff, which is excellent. Now, we are totally impressed with ourselves, but we discover, being bankers and not engineers, that the critical thing in making a mobile phone is not the electronics. It is not the ability to get it into the form factor you want. It is how much battery life you're going to get. Battery life is totally dependent on how big the battery is. And in a credit card type form factor, that is not a big battery. We were not deterred by the fact that you had to plug your credit card into the power every night. We discovered that, with market testing, we discovered actually that people weren't going to be willing to do that if they had to do it every couple of hours, that actually charging a credit card in your wallet every night was inconvenient anyway, and we were not deterred by this. What we decided to do was go back to our fab company and say, actually, we need to be able to charge it without getting it out of the wallet. We need wireless charging. Thanks. And they do it. I mean, it's amazing what these people can do. And so now what happens is you've got this credit card, it's digital, it's electronic, and when you come home, you're supposed to put your wallet or your handbag on this mat, right, and it charges by magnets, like an electric toothbrush. Unfortunately, something else happens with magnets, and that is that you rub out every other credit card that's actually in the wallet. That was actually quite a competitive plus, by the way. However, it wasn't to be, and eventually we realised how stupid this was and canned the project altogether. I'm going to come back to how we solved this problem in a minute, but I was pretty desperate at this point because not only had I no breakthrough, all the products we'd created were rip-offs or boring, and I'm getting desperate. And it turned out that there was a solution. And the solution was, what if we enlist everyone in Lloyd's, everyone in the bank, in the process of creating the stuff that we wanted? And what we did was create a game. This is a picture of the game. So you get paid in a virtual currency. We called it bank beans. And every time you put an idea in, you get some bank beans. And every time you vote or comment, you get bank beans. And this competitive situation is you want to be the richest person in bank beans. And once you have bank beans, you can actually invest those bank beans to buy shares in the ideas you like the most. This turned out to be quite the thing. Everyone in the bank gets fully involved in it. It's really exciting. This competition is happening. And I was emboldened by this success. So then I decided that it would be a really clever experiment to actually back the bank bean with cash. So now you can earn these bank beans, and at a certain point in time, you can cash them out. Now, I might not be an engineer, and I might be a failed innovator, but in theory, at least I should know about banking. But actually, what I did when we did this was my rewards budget was fixed, but every time you did anything, you got a bank bean. I created hyperinflation of the bank bean. This does not make a fun game. We tried various macroeconomic techniques to fix this, including bank bean taxation. I can assure you, taxing a virtual currency is an even less fun game. And eventually we fixed this, but then I had a new problem. I discovered that all these people were working on their ideas in their spare time, and that they would selectively release information about their ideas to the market to manipulate the price. Okay, so now I'm so going to be fired because I've caused all these employees in a bank to do insider trading. But actually, the reality was, the behaviour we got from this was the right behaviour. All these people were working on the ideas, and stuff started to happen. It was quite amazing. So eventually what I did was I put the question of the phone to the crowd, and the crowd came back with something amazing, a balance button, a key fob. And all you do when you push the fob is it gives you a balance in your account right now, and I'm going, that's the most stupid thing ever. But actually, the crowd were right. People want to have a key fob in which we could put a payments chip, by the way, so they push the button, they get the balance, and they are not embarrassed at the point of sale when their card is declined. Turned out to be an interesting thing. The other thing I learned is that although you might not be able to make rivers of equations that work in the real world, the minute you start getting a large number of innovations running at once, it starts to get a bit predictable. And that predictability was something I'd been searching for my entire career, and it was an amazing thing. Well, anyway, then what happened is we had a global financial crisis. And Lloyds Bank, one of the safest banks in Europe, was forced at gunpoint by the then Prime Minister to acquire the least safe bank in Europe. And for £1, we became a 48% owned government entity. The government had to prop up all the banks in Europe, and the thing that they had to do that for was because if they hadn't, there was the chance everything would collapse. And after government had spent all this money doing that, there was no money left. And we got this guy, this is the new Prime Minister, and he decided, since there's no money, what we're going to have is a policy called Big Society, which actually means we're going to have the citizens do the work that government should have done but now can't afford to do. And because my bank was basically nationalised, the government invited me to take the role of Chief Technology Officer at one of their largest institutions, which I did. And the reason they did that was they wanted this predictable innovation program, which I took there. Now, the thing is, it's the British Civil Service. And so that is not a term you ascribe to innovation, and in fact, there are some people in that organisation who have not yet discovered that there is no longer an empire. So I'm not exactly thrilled and optimistic that we're going to be able to do much. And actually, in this Big Society program, government had had a few mistakes. They'd put out a few of these crowd things, and what they'd gotten was not a crowd, but a mob. A very interesting experiment with that, one that I wasn't personally responsible for, and thank goodness I wasn't, was they put out this challenge. Citizens, tell us how we're going to save money. The number one suggestion was put this guy, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, put him in a custard bath. And as you can imagine, the papers went wild over this. Crowdsourcing is dead. Everything you could imagine doing in this area is quite dead, and you should actually stop doing this right now, go back to the old way. But we persevered, and in my first 2 weeks in government, one of the things they made me do was go and work on the front line. So the department is the part that's responsible for welfare payments, social security, all of those sorts of things. It spends about 1/3 of the GDP of the United Kingdom every year. And I went to this Job Centre Plus. And this Job Centre Plus is where people go to sign on to get their money. It's way up in Scotland, it's in the middle of nowhere, and it is in an area of significant financial poverty. And I was put into what they call the Crisis Loans Program, and I had to serve these people who, for whatever reason, had lost their dole checks and had an emergency crisis and had to have money now. There were some limitations on how many times you could do this, and one guy in particular came in, a young guy. He had no money. It was snowing outside. We declined his request for emergency assistance because he'd asked for it before. And I turned around to this frontline worker next to me, this frontline worker in this Job Centre Plus, and I go, what will happen to him? And she goes to me, we either will see him again or we will not. It depends on whether he finds shelter tonight. And I thought, you know, surely these people at the front line who are totally motivated, totally devastated by these situations they're in every day, surely they want to make things better. Well, anyway, we put the game up, and indeed, these people rallied around it. The same stock trading was happening. We did everything the same, except, of course, it's government. So you can't pay people to play. And it worked. And it worked amazingly. And in this department, they saved £21 million in less than 9 months because these frontline workers were motivated and they wanted a change, and all they needed was a voice to do it. It turned out to be a really powerful thing. I don't know, by the way, what happened to the guy, but I do know that the Crisis Loan Program is now much more friendly in situations of urgency because this system helped them make a difference. But the most important thing I learned was, at Lloyds, I had hyperinflation of the bank bean. In government, I had no bank beans and no money, but in the end, it made no difference to the game. People played because of the joy of making a difference. And it turned out that that was the most amazing thing of all. So my answer now, after this journey, is that yes, you can predict innovation. What you can't do, by the way, is imagine that you can model human beings and get a decent outcome in a computer. But if you put human beings enough together and use that, you can create amazing outcomes. Innovation can be predictable, can be repeatable, and can indeed be a business process that most organisations should adopt. Thank you so much for listening to me today. This is my book. I've just started to document some of the science that we're now doing in my company around predicting these kinds of things. It's down in the bookstore downstairs, and I'd be delighted to have a further chat with you after if you'd like to know anything else. Thank you for listening.